My initial plan for this second episode of Retro Tech was to talk about the Red Sound Cycloops. I was going to explain that it's basically still undefeated as the king of DJ samplers, and I have both an original Cycloops and a later Soundbite Micro to demonstrate for you. But then I mentioned this to a DJ friend of mine, Steve Walton, and he mentioned that he had another, rarer Red Sound product sitting in his shed. And when I heard that, well, here we are. Welcome to Beatsource Retro Tech, the place where we talk about some of the DJ gear from the past, which in many cases shaped how we play today, and in other cases, like this, were glorious failures. Red Sound were a small UK company who made waves in 1998 with their first product, the Voyager Beat Extractor. This took audio from a pair of phono or line level inputs, analysed the BPM from the audio being received, and spat out MIDI clock, enabling users to sync MIDI hardware like drum machines and sequencers with their decks. All of these picks are coming from the contemporaneous Sound on Sound review, which I will link in the description below. They also released a couple of impressive hardware synthesizers and an effects unit, the Darkstar, but their breakthrough release was the Cycloops, a loop sampler, which used that same audio BPM detection to enable DJs to capture loops from tracks on the fly and play them back synced up and on beat. I won't go much into that here as it's still a candidate for a future episode, but it and the later upgraded versions, the Soundbite, Soundbite XL and the Micro, are still much in demand on the used market, especially on the techno scene. What we're talking about today though is Red Sound's first and only attempt at making a DJ mixer, the Infader. This was released in the year 2000, making it a quarter century old now. It's important to remember, for context, that working with frequencies was all the rage back in the late 90s. Kill switches were a must on every new mixer for a while, and it wasn't all that long since EQs had become standard issue. And so obviously the big selling point was the module on the Infader containing 3 crossfaders for lows, mids and highs. But what is forgotten about the Infader, and I'm not 100% on this, so if you know better, please let me know in the comments, is that it might well have been the first actual digital DJ mixer. Everything in it is put through the DSP or digital signal processor and fed out via digital to analog converters, which, whether the first instance of this or not, is still very notable for the time. So here it is in all its glory, the Red Sound Infader, and I really can't believe that a quarter of a century after its release, I'm getting a chance to play with one for the first time, and it's really kind of interesting. This tri-fader thing we'll get to in a second. First of all, let's not judge it by today's standards. I'm hearing in my headphones a lot of hiss and humming noises and all kinds of stuff. This is clearly, I've got the wrong voltage on the power supply for a start, but also it's just feels like it's on its way out. This left up fader, I daren't touch it during this video because that's dying. The mic input just seems to be completely dead already, but this all kind of works well enough that I can show you how this thing works. So let's get some music going and I'll show you the first thing that I think is really interesting, which is the send and return. It's very comprehensive to begin with, right? You have selector, you've got a level for the send and a level for the return. You can send channel 1 post fader, pre-fader, or you can send the master and then post and pre-fader for channel 2 as well. You can return into the master or into either of the 2 channels. But the interesting part is how it's activated with this paddle here, which at the time was not how things were done with DJ effects send and returns. But today, here in 2025, that's pretty much standard issue, right? You know, your Rev 7, your Rain Performer, your S9, S11, Rain 72, they've all got these paddles on them, right? So, and it works in the same way. So forward, locks it on, pull it towards you, and it springs back. And that is just standard issue now for DJ kits. So turn it on, sending channel 1 post fader, activate my EFX 500. That's a potential candidate for a future episode of this series, by the way. I'm going to go to single fader mode and we can see it is post fader as I've set it to be. But yeah, that activation method, that's the interesting part there. Really kind of into that. Editing Mojaxx here, just jumping in to point out that although DJ mixers didn't have effects paddles like that at the time, one particular effects unit did. the EFX 500, which is literally sat right there in the video. And that one came out before the Infader, so dough, I guess? Back to the video. Anyway, let's move on. The EQs are full kill. They're minus 85 dB cut. Interestingly, very little boost on them though. We've got, on the high and mids, we've got 4 dB boost. On the low, just a 2 dB boost. So like very little opportunity to boost the frequencies, but you can take them right out. Obviously you have that on both decks. Then we're going to move down to the crossfader, so let me get the other deck running. So right now we're in Master X1 mode, right? So the top ones are making no difference at all. You've got a crossfader curve. So sharp cut, or gentle cut, or gentle blend. It's not the sharpest cutting, or the most short distance of cutting I've ever come across, but interestingly, these are all like digitally processed, so there is no bleeding in these faders. These are kind of dead, but nothing going on with these. These are all fine. But that's your regular crossfader mode, and then we have a reverse. And if you're kind of blending between the two, both these reverse switches do exactly the same thing. They just reverse. But now let's get the magic going, right? So we're going to come across to the left-hand side. We're going to turn on Split X3. And now we're going to start playing with some frequencies. So we can crossfade just the mids, just the high end, or the mid and the highs and the lows. And we hit that reverse. We hit that reverse now, it's just going to switch them. It's definitely a unique way of working with frequencies. The issue I find with this, in my initial playing around, is I don't think the actual cutoff points are really ideal. Like, to get all of the vocal across, you really need the mids and the highs. If you just do the mids, it's pretty hollow. Like, you don't really get. And I've tried this with a number of different tracks with more prominent vocals as well. And yeah, in general, just transferring the mid across is not enough to get that vocal over in full. You do really need the high as well. So I think there is an element of execution here which is not quite nailed. But for creative DJs who do really long blends, like, this is kind of neat. Especially the idea of just bringing across the two bass lines between the two. With a few tweaks to the frequency cutoffs, I think this could be absolutely dangerous. You see, you get quite a hollow sound with that mid. That's the main thing. It's kind of standing out. It's the mid frequencies that seem to be just kind of wrong. And then further still, it goes weirder. It goes even more weird, right? This is in normal mode. Let's switch it now to center off mode. And that does what it says on the tin. So we bring it into the middle. And when you put the faders in the middle, everything's off. So I don't know what that's for. I guess it's more of a kind of, gives you a different effect in the middle. Maybe this could be useful for turntablism. But I don't really see how. It's not like you can get like a double click out of it or something. So yeah, the center off thing, I'm not sure what the point of that is. If you know what the point of that is, let me know in the comments. I don't know. But take that out of the equation, go back to this. And it is really fun. I would love to see a dedicated piece of maybe MIDI hardware or something to actually enable this. Because yeah, there are lots of ways you can work with your EQs, and of course you can still EQ as well. It respects the EQs on each side. They are before the faders. Just think of this as like a techno mixing kind of tool. just implemented a little bit better, this could be absolutely killer. And then we can hit that reverse. Definitely a very, very interesting piece. Usually in these episodes I will do chapters on why it rocked and why it sucked, but you've kind of seen both of those aspects in the demo. The Infader was definitely not a successful product, and although I can't find any info about why Red Sound died as a company, the amount of investment of time and money required to make the Infader, only for it to then flop, must surely have contributed to that. The thing that makes me a little sad is that the promised other modules they said would be available instead of the Trifader never came to pass. They were such an innovative and creative company, I can only imagine how interesting those would have been. They do still have a website up, just one page with a couple of manuals available for download, and there is an email address on there which I contacted but sadly got no response. I'd love to hear the full story of the company one day. In straight hardware terms, we've never seen anything copy the Trifader idea directly. Everything still just has one crossfader on it. One reason for this might be that Red Sound, according to the Infader manual, actually patented the concept, although UK patents generally only last for 20 years, so that might have expired now. But there was later a feature in the DJM 2000 from Pioneer DJ, Frequency Mix, which was part of the effects suite and allows you to crossfade 7 different frequency bands between the decks. I loved that mixer and still own one to this day, but the complexity of it seemed to scare a lot of people off, so we've never seen that feature again from the company. In more recent times, we have seen something similar to the Trifader, but in software form. Algorithms DJ allows users to set up different crossfaders not just for frequency bands, but for different stems like drums, bass, melody, and vocals. This is kind of the logical endpoint for this concept, and it's a lot of fun to use. So if you fancy making a Trifader of your own, get yourself a MIDI fader box, turn it sideways, and map the faders to DJ. For me, Red Sound are one of those companies who will always be in my mind when I think of that particularly fertile late 90s period, before software on computers or embedded took over the DJ booth, when designers were pulling out all the stops to bring features to DJs on hardware which, just a few years later, could be achieved on a laptop without a second thought. So whilst no, I don't want the Infader itself to come back, as I've now discovered it's not actually that good, if Red Sound the company were to reappear somehow, I'd be very excited to see what they could achieve a quarter of a century on in this new digital age. In the comments, I'd love to hear if you have any memories of the Infader or Red Sound gear in general, or can you fill us in any more on the story of the company? And let me know what other retro kits you'd love to see on a future episode too. Things which you think deserve to be reappraised or just to be remembered. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Beatsource Retro Tech. If you liked it, be sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss any future videos. And hey, if you haven't already, you can try Beatsource for free and join DJcity for just $10. All links are down in the description. I'll see you next time!